Hello again. This video is part of my series on how to navigate scenes in Stratiscape. It's called Auto Flip, excuse the graphic. And it is in a sense a workplace safety announcement. Auto flipping, which is unique to Stratiscape, automatically reverses the color palette when you look at the back side of a scene. As I said, it is unique to Stratiscape and, as you will see, it's something you do not want to turn off. You find the Auto Flip button here on the Wave Field tab, and as you can see, clicking it on and off, when you click it, initially it doesn't appear to do anything. But it does, and to explain what it does and why, we must return almost to the beginning of time and take a critical look at this display and the whole subject of seismic polarity. More than 40 years ago, I and others began experimenting with using color to display seismic data. The first examples I produced, which look much like the display you're looking at now, used blue for negative amplitudes, white for the zero crossing, and red for positive amplitudes. At the time, I had no theoretical reason to use that combination. I used it because blue and red are the most visually distinct colors we can see. But there was no reason to believe that red was naturally structurally high, a term that comes into play later, or that blue was naturally low. They were just visually distinct. Visually, as you can see here as I flip the polarity, it doesn't make a significant difference whether blue is high or red is high. The display is basically a chromatic square wave, a term that was thrown at me the first time I showed an example to an interpreter. Red high, blue high. Wasn't important. If you knew the polarity of the display, you would be fine. But that, of course, wasn't the end of the story. Despite its unpopularity, the display soon became the de facto way of looking at seismic on a color monitor, and consequently, both the SEG and EAGE decided to standardize the palette. Naturally, they chose opposite polarities, with the SEG deciding that blue, which I'll show you here, should be high, and the EAGE deciding that red should be high. That distinction remains today, because as I said, there doesn't seem to be an inherent polarity to color. But as with pretty much everything that I've held true in my life, it turns out to be false. There is a polarity to color, and to prove it, I'm switching to this line, which is one of the first that I produced in virtual reality, all the way back in the year 2000. And it's the one I was experimenting with during my PhD thesis when the point became dramatically obvious. Let me zoom into it and I'll show you what I mean. I do not use this palette anymore, mainly because since we're looking at amplitude and structure, we don't need the color definition, and in fact, it turns out that palettes like these are counterproductive and tend to mask steeply dipping events. But that's not important for the moment. What is important is what happens to the display when I reverse the color palette and make blue high and the reds and yellows low. I'll do that now. To illustrate the point, let me go back and forth between these two palettes. This has the blues high following the SEG standard, and this has the reds high following the EAGE standard. I'll do that a few more times. SEG, EAGE, SEG, EAGE, and back to the SEG again. So this was something I did not expect. What is happening is that your visual system is forcing the reds, as you can see here, to appear to be the highs and the blues to be lows. You can prove this to yourself by forcing yourself to focus on a blue event. I suggest you look at these in the upper part of the section. I'll let you do that for a few seconds. If you do, the blue restores back to being high in your perception. But if you look away and then back again, the display reverts to the optical illusion, and then you have to look away because the display is too strange to look at for long. You may be thinking that this is palette specific, but it isn't. Let's go back to my first line and look at it using one of my standard, almost color-free palettes. This is our springtime palette, and I use it as the default for most of my displays. As you can see, when I zoom in, the structural highs are in shades of white, whereas the lows are light blues, and everything looks fine. But if I reverse the palette, and have the blues as a structural high, the optical illusion rears its visually confusing head. Again, so let's turn that on and off. There you go, back to normal. And, can't look at that for too long. I don't normally use this palette, but I'll leave it on because the effect is even more dramatic than using our standard springtime palette, which you can see here. So now I'll show you why this turned out to be such a problem, and I'll finally get to the main subject of the lesson, that being the auto flip option. The problem is now that with this release, I've changed how you manipulate the scene so that it's much easier to look at the back side of the display. Couldn't do that before. Previously, the display was mostly focused on viewing from the front side. But now it's just as easy to look at it from the back side. And as you can see, when you go from front to back, that optical illusion bites you very badly. So now I will go back to the springtime palette and show you what happens when you have the auto flip option on and off. With the auto flip off, which you see here, when you look at the back side of a display, the negative amplitudes become apparent structural highs. And because they retain their original color, you get the optical illusion. But with the auto flip turned on, which I'll do here, then the color palette automatically flips polarity as you switch viewing directions. So the palette in this case stops being amplitude related and becomes associated with structural highs and lows, which of course changes polarity as you flip from front to back. What this says is that you must think about color differently on a Stratiscape display. This is what you're used to. Color is used as a proxy for amplitude. And so you're thinking of red as being high, which it is here, and blue is low. But we do not use that distinction with Stratiscape displays. Here, white is structurally high, and blue is structurally low. And we keep that distinction whether positive amplitudes are high or negative amplitudes are high. I agree that this is a new way of thinking about amplitude, but believe me, the alternative is not that pleasant. So that, in a nutshell, is the auto flip option. I decided to go into some detail about it because it requires a change in thinking. This optical illusion has been a problem since the very earliest days of virtual seismic reality, and there's simply no way around it using color palettes. Every palette that I've used, including grayscale palettes, have the same problem. The visual system forces the brightest colors to appear high, and there's no way to change that. So the only option was to make sure that the brightest colors always are high. So keep the auto flip option on, and you'll be fine. For now, I am Dr. Stephen Lynch. Thank you for watching.